Where legends breathe again. Eldmyth. The world of myth is a vast, whispering tapestry, woven with threads of light and shadow, and few threads shine as brilliantly or burn out as tragically as that of Baldr the Beautiful. Who was this radiant god, whose very presence was said to be like sunlight on a hallowed field? Why do his stories, emanating from the frozen fjords and deep pine forests of the Norse lands, echo with such profound beauty and such inevitable sorrow? To speak of Baldr is to speak of innocence in a world of fated violence, of purity amidst the primal chaos of the Viking pantheon. He was the son of the All-Father, Odin, and the motherly goddess of the earth, Frigg. From his conception, he was destined for greatness, but in the Norse cosmos, greatness is often a prelude to tragedy. His name itself is thought to mean prince or lord, a title befitting his status as the most beloved of the Aesir gods. Imagine the great hall of Gladsheim within the celestial realm of Asgard. The air is thick with the smell of roasting boar and mead, the sound of boasting and poetry. And then Baldr enters. A hush falls. He is not a warrior like Thor, whose power is a crashing thunderclap, nor is he a cunning strategist like his father, whose mind is a labyrinth of secrets. Baldr's power is different. It is the power of light itself. His hair is like spun gold. His skin seems to radiate a soft, inner luminescence, and his eyes hold the clear, untroubled blue of a summer sky. He is the god of light, of joy, of purity, and of reconciliation. When he speaks, his voice carries the warmth of the sun, capable of soothing the most bitter of disputes among the gods. He is, in essence, the conscience of Asgard, a living reminder of what the gods fight to protect from the encroaching darkness of the giants and the chaos that lurks beyond the walls of their world. To understand Baldr's significance, we must first journey not to the height of his glory, but to the moment of his conception within the grand, cosmic architecture of Norse belief. The Vikings saw their universe as a collection of interconnected realms, hanging upon the great world tree, Yggdrasil. Asgard, the realm of the Aesir gods, was a fortress of order and civilization, perpetually threatened by the chaotic forces of Jotunheim, the land of the giants. Into this precarious balance, Baldr was born. His birth was not merely a familial event for Odin and Frigg, it was a cosmic one. The sagas, particularly those penned by the 13th century Icelandic scholar Snorri Sturluson in his prose Edda, tell us that from infancy, Baldr was marked by an extraordinary quality. His dreams, however, were not of glory and conquest, but of his own demise. He was plagued by foreboding visions, nightmares of a great darkness descending upon him. These dreams cast a long shadow over the golden halls of Asgard. A god of such purity, experiencing such dread, was an omen that could not be ignored. It signaled a vulnerability in the very heart of the divine order. Odin, the seeker of knowledge, the master of runes, would not stand idly by. He saddled his eight-legged steed, Sleipnir, and undertook a journey no other god would dare. A descent into the underworld itself, to the realm of hell, to consult a dead seeress. This act alone underscores the gravity of Baldr's dreams. The All-Father, ruler of the gods, was so troubled by the nightmares of his shining son that he ventured into the land of the dead for answers. What he learned there was a prophecy of the most devastating kind. Frigg, the mother, responded to this looming threat not with war, but with a desperate, meticulous act of protection. Driven by a love that would define her son's legend, she embarked upon a quest that would showcase her own formidable power. She journeyed through all the 9 realms, from the highest branches of Yggdrasil to its deepest roots. She spoke to fire and water, to iron and stone, to the beasts of the earth and the birds of the air. To every entity, every substance, every conceivable thing in all of creation, she extracted a solemn oath. She asked the towering oaks and the fragile reeds, the sharpened spear and the cooking pot, the growling wolf and the tiny field mouse, the raging river and the flickering flame. She asked them all, one by one, to swear they would never harm her beloved son, Baldr the Beautiful. And such was the power of Frigg's love, and such was the universal affection for Baldr himself, that everything in the world agreed. The very fabric of reality swore an unbreakable vow. Iron and stone promised to turn away from him. Fire vowed to refuse to burn him. Poison swore it would not course through his veins. When Frigg returned to Asgard, she announced her success. A great weight was lifted from the gods. Baldr was now truly invulnerable. To celebrate this newfound safety, the gods devised a new pastime. They would gather in the courtyard of Asgard, and in a display of joyous exuberance, they would take turns hurling weapons at Baldr. It became a grand, celebratory game. Spears would shatter against his chest. Axes would bounce harmlessly from his brow. Arrows would fall to his feet, their points blunted. Baldr would stand, laughing, bathed in light, utterly untouched by the projectiles meant to kill. It was the ultimate testament to his mother's love, a divine spectacle of invincibility. But in the shadows of this radiant celebration, one figure did not share in the mirth. Loki, the shape-shifting god of mischief and chaos, watched the games with a growing, venomous resentment. Where Baldr was light and order, Loki was fire and chaos. He could not abide the perfection, the universal adoration bestowed upon Odin's son. It grated against his nature. He saw not a beloved god, but a symbol of a world that could and did exclude him. And so the trickster's mind began to work, weaving a plot of exquisite malice. Disguising himself as an old woman, he sought out Frigg in her hall, Fensalir. He found her spinning thread, content and secure in her success. He spoke to her kindly, praising the god's new game and the incredible invulnerability of her son. "Is it truly true," he asked in a wheedling, innocent voice, "that every single thing in all the world has sworn this oath to you?" Frigg, her guard lowered by pride and contentment, smiled warmly at the old crone. "Yes," she replied, "every single thing has sworn the oath. I have been to every corner of creation, well, almost everything." She paused her spinning, a faint, dismissive look on her face. There was one little plant, so young, so small, growing on the eastern slope of Valhalla. It is called mistletoe. It seemed too harmless, too weak and insignificant to ever pose a threat to my mighty son. I saw no need to demand an oath from it. The disguised Loki's eyes gleamed with a terrible knowledge. He had found the flaw in the perfect armor, the single, unsworn thread in Frigg's tapestry of protection. With a polite farewell, he departed, his heart cold with triumph. The stage was now set for tragedy. Loki hurried to the eastern slope of Valhalla, and there, just as Frigg had said, he found the mistletoe plant. It was a small, unassuming thing with pale berries and weak, pliable branches, the most harmless of all growing things. But in Loki's hands, it was to become the deadliest weapon in the cosmos. He carved a sharp dart from its wood, a tiny, insignificant-looking thing. He then returned to the courtyard where the gods were still at their game. The atmosphere was boisterous and loud. Thor was heaving a massive boulder that shattered into dust against Baldr's shoulder, and the thunder god's laughter echoed off the golden walls. In a corner, away from the main throng, stood Hodr, Baldr's own brother. Hodr was blind, a god of darkness and winter, and he stood isolated, unable to participate in the joy of the others. He could hear the laughter, the sounds of impact, the cheers, but he could not see and could not join. Loki approached him, his voice friendly and conspiratorial. "Why do you not honor your brother, Hodr?" he whispered. "Why do you not take part in the celebration?" Hodr turned his sightless eyes towards the voice, a look of sadness on his face. "I have no weapon," he said, "and even if I did, I cannot see to aim it." Loki's smile was a cruel slash. "Here," he said, placing the mistletoe dart into Hodr's hand and guiding his arm. "I will help you. I will aim for you. Let us honor Baldr together." Hodr, trusting, nodded. He drew back his arm with Loki guiding it and threw the mistletoe dart. It flew through the air, a tiny, pale sliver unnoticed by all. It struck Baldr in the chest. The sound was not a mighty crash, but a soft, sickening tear. Baldr stopped laughing. The light in his eyes flickered. He staggered, a look of profound shock and confusion on his beautiful face, and then he fell dead onto the courtyard stones. The laughter died instantly. The joy was extinguished. The light of the world had gone out. The silence that fell upon Asgard was heavier than any sound. a physical pressure of grief. Then, a wail of anguish rose, a sound of pure, unadulterated sorrow that came from Frigg. The mother's greatest fear had been realized by the one thing she had deemed too insignificant to fear. The gods were paralyzed, not by an enemy host, but by a loss so fundamental it shook the foundations of their reality. They gathered around the fallen form of their brightest star, unable to comprehend the darkness that had so suddenly engulfed them. But Frigg's love, even in this ultimate moment of despair, would not be quenched. A desperate, impossible hope kindled in her heart. She stood, her face streaked with tears but set with determination, and she spoke to the assembled gods. She would not accept this fate. She would send a messenger to the underworld, to the cold, damp halls of hell, the goddess of the dead who shared that realm's name. She would beg, she would bargain, she would offer any price for the return of her son. The task fell to Hermod the Bold, another of Odin's sons. With the speed of desperation, he mounted Odin's own steed, the eight-legged Sleipnir, and spurred the magical horse on a gallop down the long, dark road to Helheim, the only one who would dare to ride to the land of the dead and demand an audience with its queen. The journey was a descent into ever-deepening gloom, down a road called the Hellway, a path no living thing was meant to travel. For 9 long nights, Hermod rode through valleys of deep shadow, over rivers of ice, and past the gnarled, clutching branches of trees that wept black sap, until he reached the towering, icy gates of hell itself. Hermod, his heart pounding not with fear but with a brother's desperate hope, did not hesitate at the gates of hell. He rode Sleipnir straight through, the clatter of hooves on the frozen stone echoing through the vast, silent hall within. And there, on a high throne of black ice, sat Hel herself. She was a terrifying figure, half a beautiful, sorrowful woman and half a corpse, blue and decaying. The hall was filled with a cold so profound it felt like a physical weight. And there, sitting at a table as if in life, was Baldr. He was pale, his radiance dimmed to a faint memory, but he was whole. His brother's heart leapt at the sight. Hermod dismounted and approached the throne of the death goddess, his head held high. He delivered Frigg's plea, his voice echoing in the immense silence. He spoke of the grief of the Aesir, of the desolation of all the 9 realms, of a mother's love that reached even into this sunless place. He begged for Baldr's release. Hel listened, her one living eye regarding him with an unnerving stillness. When he finished, she spoke, her voice like the cracking of winter ice. "The love for Baldr is renowned," she said, "and it touches even this cold heart. So I will set a condition, a test of that famed love. If it is truly, as you say, that everything in all creation weeps for Baldr, then he shall return to Asgard and the light will be restored." But she paused, her corpse eye seeming to gleam. "If one single thing, one voice, one entity in all the wide world refuses to weep for him, then he shall remain here with me forever." It was a cruel hope, a razor's edge of a chance, but it was a chance nonetheless. Hermod, filled with a fiery determination, spoke briefly with his brother, and then mounted Sleipnir to race back to the world of the living with the news. The fate of Baldr now rested on the tears of all creation. A great wave of mourning swept out from Asgard, a tidal wave of grief that washed over every realm. The message was sent to every corner of Yggdrasil, "Weep for Baldr," and the world obeyed. The Aesir and the Vanir gods wept tears of gold and silver. The elves in their luminous forests wept tears like morning dew. The dwarves in their sooty forges under the mountains wept tears that sizzled on the hot stone. The very elements who had sworn oaths to Frigg now honored him in death. Fire wept hissing tears of steam. Stone wept by exuding slow, cold moisture. Iron wept by gathering rust. The great seas rose in salt-water lamentation. The forests filled with the sound of weeping leaves and creaking boughs. In Midgard, the world of humanity, people looked up at the suddenly dimmer sky and felt a profound, inexplicable sorrow, and they too wept. The air itself grew thick with the moisture of a billion tears, a global storm of grief. It seemed as if Hel's condition would be met. The collective sorrow of the cosmos was a tangible force, a river of tears flowing towards Helheim to wash Baldr clean and carry him home. Messengers raced back to Odin and Frigg, reporting that all of creation was in mourning. The hope in Gladsheim, though tempered by grief, began to flicker into a fragile flame. They had done it. They had moved the universe itself to tears. Everything, from the greatest mountain to the smallest grain of sand, was weeping for the lost god of light. Everything, that is, but one. In a dark, damp cave, far from the light of the sun or the sound of weeping, sat a giantess. Her name was Thok, though that was likely a disguise, for many scholars believe this was Loki in yet another of his cruel forms. The messengers of the gods found her there, huddled and unmoving. They explained their desperate mission. They told her of the great tragedy of the light extinguished, of the condition set by Hel, and they begged her with all the eloquence they could muster to weep for Baldr and allow him to return to the living. The figure in the shadows stirred. A low, grating laugh echoed in the cavern. The voice that spoke was dry as dust and cold as the grave. "Weep for Baldr," she croaked. "Why should I weep? He gave me no joy in life. Let Hel hold what she has. I will shed no tears for him." And with those words, that single, stubborn refusal from one entity in all the cosmos, the hope of the gods shattered. The river of tears stopped. The deal was broken. Baldr was lost to them forever. The figure, Thok, sank back into the shadows, a smirk of satisfaction on her features, the unmistakable signature of Loki's malice. He had not only engineered the murder, but he had also ensured its permanence. His jealousy had extinguished the light of Asgard, and his cunning had sealed it in darkness. The gods' grief now turned to a cold, hard fury. The hunt for Loki began, a pursuit that would itself become the stuff of legend, a tale of vengeance that would ripple through the sagas and ultimately contribute to the final, cataclysmic event of Ragnarok. The death of Baldr was not merely a personal tragedy. It was the trigger for the beginning of the end, the event that made the twilight of the gods, Ragnarok, an absolute certainty. The world, having failed to bring its light back, was now sliding irrevocably towards winter and chaos. The binding of Loki, as punishment for his role in Baldr's death, is a story of brutal poetry. The gods, in their rage, tracked him to a remote mountain retreat. But Loki, ever the shapeshifter, had transformed himself into a salmon, blending into a rushing stream. The gods, wise to his tricks, wove a net of his own design, for it was said Loki himself invented the fishing net. Thor waded into the water and cast the net. Loki the salmon tried to leap over it, but Thor, with his immense strength, caught him midair, gripping him tightly by the tail. They dragged him to a cave and bound him with the entrails of his own son, a grotesque and cruel irony. A great serpent was fastened above his head, its venom dripping slowly, incessantly onto his face. His wife, Sigyn, stayed loyal, holding a bowl to catch the poison. But whenever she had to empty it, the venom would fall, and Loki would writhe in such agony that the earth itself would shake. This was the price of killing Baldr, an eternity of torment, a slow-burning rage that would only fuel his hatred until the day the bonds would break at Ragnarok. And in that final battle, it is prophesied that Baldr and Hodr, the brothers of light and darkness, reconciled by their shared experience of death, will return from Hel to fight side by side. They will emerge into a new, reborn world after the old one has been scoured by fire and flood, a symbol of hope that even from the deepest tragedy, renewal is possible. The legacy of Baldr extends far beyond the smoky halls of the Viking Age. He has been a potent symbol for centuries, reinterpreted by poets, artists, and scholars. In the 18th and 19th centuries, during the Romantic period, Baldr was rediscovered as a figure of sublime tragedy, the beautiful, innocent hero struck down by a cruel and arbitrary fate. The German poet Friedrich Gottlieb Klopstock wrote an epic about him, and the composer Richard Wagner wove elements of his story into the complex tapestry of his Ring cycle, where the character of Siegfried shares some of Baldr's invulnerable, yet faded qualities. In modern times, Baldr appears in countless fantasy novels, video games, and comic books, often as a tragic paladin or a fallen angel figure. His name is invoked in discussions of dying and rising gods, linking him to figures like Osiris or Christ, divine beings whose death and potential return symbolize the cycles of nature, the death of winter and the hope of spring. He represents the profound human fear of losing what is most pure and beautiful in our world, and the enduring, often desperate, hope for its return. He is a myth that asks the hardest questions about the nature of goodness in a universe that seems indifferent or even hostile to it. And so, the story of Baldr endures, not as a simple tale of good and evil, but as a profound and complex symphony of light and shadow. He is the sun god whose light is extinguished by the most insignificant of things, a reminder that perfection is always vulnerable, that the most carefully laid plans of gods and mortals can be undone by a single, overlooked detail. He is the beloved sun, whose death causes the universe to weep, showing us the power of collective grief and the bonds of love that tie all existence together. And he is the harbinger of hope, the god who is prophesied to return from the land of the dead to a world made new. The myth of Baldr asks us to look at our own world, at the things we hold most dear and most vulnerable, and to recognize the fragile beauty inherent in them. It is a story that resonates because it is, in the end, our story, a narrative of love, loss, and the stubborn, flickering hope for redemption. As the mists of time swirl around the legends of the North, the figure of Baldr the Beautiful remains, a luminous ghost in our collective imagination, a question asked in a whisper. What would we be willing to give? What tears would we be willing to shed to bring the light back into our world? Another legend fades, but the next awaits. Like this video, subscribe and continue the journey through myths.